Welcome NEC fans to our latest NEC Now podcast on the NEC Overtime Pod. Today I am joined by Northeast Conference Commissioner Noreen Morris. We will be discussing Title IX, gender equity in the NEC, and the role of women in collegiate athletics. Commissioner, thank you for being here today.
Morgan, I'm thrilled to be with you today.
That is excellent. For those who may be unfamiliar, Title IX is a landmark civil rights law passed in 1972 prohibiting discrimination based on gender for education programs and activities, including athletics, that receive federal aid. Prior to Title IX, the NCAA did not host championships in women's sports or provide athletic scholarships to women. Today, however, the NCAA is home to over 200,000 female student athletes and sponsors over 10,000 women's teams that are eligible to compete in NCAA championship sports. First, I would just like to discuss your own experiences with Title IX. You were a student athlete at Cornell, graduating exactly 15 years after the signing of Title IX. What are the most significant changes and hopefully improvements that you have seen since your time as a student athlete?
Well, actually, I'll go back to before my time as a student athlete. When I was about 7 or 8, I grew up with 3 brothers, and I wanted to play soccer along with my younger brother. We went to sign up for the soccer league, and they called my dad the next day and said, this is a boys' league. She can't play. And there was no girls' league. And so since my dad had already written the check and they had taken it, he said, yeah, I paid, so she's going to play. So I was the only girl in the whole league for that year. And it took probably about 3 or 4 years before they actually started a league for girls. I went to junior high, there was no team for me to play on. And then when I got to high school, still no team. So I actually petitioned the Board of Ed and went out and got signatures and spoke in front of the Board of Ed. And my sophomore year was the first year we actually had a girls soccer team in my high school. And so that was, leading up to college, I was the first recruit for Cornell women's soccer. So the year prior, they had just started the team, but with the women from the club team. Mm-hmm. So I was the first recruited class there. So I've seen a lot of firsts, and to see where we are now in terms of the number of teams that women and girls can play on and the opportunities, I think Title IX for sure made those inroads and those provided the opportunities for the young girls and women to compete. So I have seen going from not being able to play as a 7-year-old to going to, in Chicago in 1999, the Olympic year when the women's national team played in Chicago. So I went to Soldier Field. There were 70,000 people in the stands watching a women's soccer game. And I was surrounded by young girls who were just so excited to be there and to watch their role models play. I didn't have a role model as an athlete. So really I've seen it go from 0 to where we are now, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's like trailblazing since step 1. That's really incredible. Okay, well, in the NEC's gender equity statement, the conference stands by its commitment to providing fair and equitable opportunities for member institutions, student athletes, coaches, and staff. The NEC has demonstrated really great progress towards gender equity, both within the conference office and throughout member institutions. For example, across Division I, only about 42% of conference staffs are female. Within the NEC staff, however, this number rises to 50%. Additionally, the NEC is one of only 5 Division I conferences with at least 2 female athletic directors and a female commissioner. How have you personally approached gender equity at the conference level, and why do you think the NEC has been so successful, relatively speaking?
The role that I've played, as a female commissioner, and also the role that I play currently as the co-chair of the NCAA Gender Equity Task Force, I've been privy to so much data and so much anecdotal information about the lack of women in leadership positions. And so I've been very intentional about trying to place women in positions in our league, as well as help our institutions when they're looking to hire athletic directors or coaches as to, hey, what do you need? I'm here to help. Let me get you in touch with some people who might be able to give you some names of women who will be good candidates for those jobs. And so personally, I have tried to be an advocate for women to get into the sports industry. And, if anyone calls me and says, listen, I'm interested in getting to sports, male or female, I will talk to you, but I'm really excited to talk with the women who want to get into this industry. And in terms of the NEC, as you mentioned, we have a great deal of diversity within our league office, but at one point in time we had 4 female athletic directors, and right now, I'm sure you'll talk about this later, is that all 10 of our women's basketball coaches are women. So I think that is a huge accomplishment. Title IX, as we talked about earlier, provided so many participation opportunities to compete, but it actually resulted in the exact opposite in terms of leadership positions. So when the NCAA took on championships for women's sports, the women used to hold probably 90% of the leadership positions in administration and in coaching. And now coaching, it's less than 50% of women coach women's sports. So that's the place that we really need to put our emphasis, that and leadership positions in administration. So we've been very diligent and very intentional about trying to, from a conference-wide perspective, implement some initiatives that will help us build the pipeline for future female head coaches and future female administrators.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And you mentioned your work on the NCAA Gender Equity Task Force. I did want to ask about that and just how your work at the conference level has aided in your kind of perspective and your additional work at the national level.
Yeah, so I think this NCAA committee is a division-wide committee, so there's members from divisions 1, 2, and 3. So it's really interesting to learn. We're actually learning from what division 2 and 3 do to try to implement some things at the division 1 level. So for instance, division 2 and 3 both had a gender equity study as part of their self-study that they have to do once every 5 years. And with the elimination of what used to be the athletic certification probably 7, 8, 9 years ago, Division I did not have a gender equity review component as a requirement for Division I institutions. And so what we learned from Division II and III, we're able to then implement in Division I, and really proud to say that based on the work of the Gender Equity Task Force, not only do we have now a bylaw that mandates institutions do a gender equity, diversity, and inclusion review once every 5 years. We most recently, in our last, in April, I think it was April, I've lost track of which month we are nowadays, that we also adopted the same thing for conference offices. So that's a first, that conference offices will now also have to do a gender equity, diversity, and inclusion review once every 5 years, and to be held to the same standard that we're holding our institutions to. And so that in large part was based on my role as a commissioner and my role on the Gender Equity Task Force, as well as my role on the NCAA Council and the Strategic Vision and Planning Committee, which is the committee that the Gender Equity Task Force reports through. So in some cases, so it all kind of came full circle with the different roles that I play, that I was able to really see that particular initiative from beginning to end.
Yeah, that's great. So another thing you had just mentioned, we're going to look specifically at women's basketball, where the NEC is the only Division I conference where every women's basketball team has a female head coach. And additionally, on these coaching staff, 72% of assistant coaches are female. While women's basketball tends to boast the highest amount of female assistants among all Division I sports, the NEC is still above average. How do you think the conference has been able to accomplish such progress within its member schools?
Yeah, and I would say that's just kudos to our institutions for making those coaching hires. Not only do we have 10 female head coaches, but we also have 2 females of color within our ranks. And so that's just a huge accomplishment. And it really is a tribute to our institutions and their commitment to expanding their pools and doing the work to look for and hire females when they're qualified, right? So they went out and find the qualified candidates to get into the pool. And so I do think, while the NEC has been working diligently, And we have a strategic plan, and one of 4 goals is a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So as a conference, we've committed to it, but it only works if our institutions also commit to it and to bring it to fruition. And they've done that with the women's basketball coaches, and to be the only conference in Division I to have we have 10, but all of our institutions with a female head coach is just amazing. And I didn't know that 72% assistant coaches are also women, which is huge, because when you think about it, the next pipeline of head coaches are assistant coaches. And so we are modeling and being able to, build that pipeline. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and within that 72%, we actually have 2 staffs that are just fully female, which is super great. And I'm going to be really excited for those future conversations.
Absolutely.
So earlier in our conversation, you mentioned not having a mentor, like a athletic mentor growing up and someone to look up to. So I was doing some reading, and in a piece published by Women Leaders in College Sports, you discussed the role Title IX has played in your life, and especially the opportunity to be mentored by other women later in your career. You specifically mentioned former Hartford University AD Pat Miser, who you interned for in 1991, saying, quote, "She exposed me to every facet of her job and showed me how incredibly helpful it is to have a female mentor in the world of college athletics." Can you just expand a little more upon this statement now that you have been a mentor for so many young women and have helped establish so many potential mentors around the conference in the form of coaches and administrators? How helpful is it to have a female mentor in this space?
Yeah, I think it's really essential to see that there are women in leadership positions that you can aspire to. The old mantra is, if you can see her, you can be her, right? So if you don't see anyone in those leadership positions and you don't have someone mentoring you, it's really hard to even envision that you can be in that role. So for me, especially with Pat Miser, I started as an intern at UConn, and she just accepted me in and said, okay, you're going to just basically shadow me for the year. So I went to all the meetings that she went to. She, explained what we're doing going in. When we left the meeting, she explained, this is what happened, and so that I could really understand the ins and outs of college athletics from a campus perspective. And if not for her, I probably wouldn't be still in this industry. Another person I'd be remiss to not mentioning is Brenda Weir. So Brenda Weir hired me at Conference USA. She was the associate commissioner there, and she took a chance on me to hire me to be their then director of governance, I think was my title. But Brenda was a huge mentor for me and taught me so much. She was the previous commissioner here at the Northeast Conference, and unfortunately lost her battle to cancer. But I was able to really learn so much from her, and to be able to follow her in this job was such an honor for me. And to be able to kind of continue the legacy that she built. And she had a short 3 years here, but she made a huge impact on the league. And so to be able to have had such direct influence by Pat and by Patty Babcock was also at UConn, and then Brenda Weir. I mean, strong women, smart, driven, but also open to mentoring. And so I've taken it upon myself to do the same and try to do as much as I can to mentor people up through the ranks. And I have a few success stories in my mentor. So Amy Boland was a student at UConn when I was there, and she played soccer, and she was one of the first student athletes that I met when I started. She she's got some highfalutin title at Texas, executive director of their development office, but went up through the compliance ranks. And Cindy Hartman, she was with me at UConn as well. She was at Duke and many other places. So it's really fun to see that as you mentor, not only are you mentoring, but you're becoming friends with them. And so they may go on and surpass you in title and impact, but it's just great to see that what you put in, you get out.
Yeah, that's really great. And that brings us to our final question, just by way of wrap up. do you have any final just words of encouragement or advice for young women looking to pursue these careers in collegiate athletics?
Yeah, I would say it's a fantastic industry to work in. It's a passion. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle, and you have to be passionate about what you do. But if you want to work in college athletics, and you can make it happen, but you've got to do the work, right? You're just not going to show up and it's going to land in your lap. You've got to, do some work as an undergraduate, get some experience somehow, network, and then just be willing to, just take off the gloves and get to work and do whatever's asked and more. That's where you're going to learn. You can do the job that you're given to you, which you have to do that job, but then seek other ways to assist other people around you. And then that's how you expand the skills, and just always be looking to broaden your horizon, so to speak. So when I look at my job and the jobs I've taken, many times I've left one job, not because I didn't like that job, but I felt like I had more to learn in different areas. So you have to get out of your comfort zone and move on to another job to expand your knowledge base. So I would say the same to the young people is just try to expand your knowledge base as much as possible, and however forum you can do that in. So I would say just go for it. It's a great industry, and people are willing to help. You just have to ask.
Yeah, great. Well, Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. This was a really great conversation, and I'm super excited to see what other conversations we have down the road. That was Northeast Conference Commissioner Noreen Morris, and this has been NEC Now.